What's up, everyone? Kyle here. I am super excited to share that my audiobook version of Travel Tips is up now. You can find it on Audible, Libro.fm, and anywhere else that you get your podcasts. Go check it out and buy a copy. It also has 30 minutes, a little over 30 minutes of bonus commentary that isn't in the actual book, so that's a little added bonus. But go check it out. I appreciate all the support, and I hope you guys enjoy the episode. Welcome, everyone. This is Our Travel Experiences. I'm your host, Kyle Rasmussen, and today I have with me Geneva, who is the owner of Unwrap Your Map. I'm super excited to have you here, Geneva. Like I was just saying, your website looks amazing and your pictures are incredible, so I'm super excited to hear about your experiences.
Thanks. I'm super glad to be having this conversation with you. I've known you've talked to a bunch of travelers over the years about all different kinds of stories, and it's always fun to hear everyone's different insights and places they've been. And so I'm pumped to be here and share some time with you today.
Yeah, awesome. Well, let's just kind of start. Tell me a little bit about your business and how that got started.
Yeah, so it's kind of a funny story how that came about. I had been traveling mostly for fun for myself for a little while, and it was interesting how many people I was meeting along the way that kind of didn't really know what their options were as far as traveling long term. And
Mhm.
I'll be honest, for the first couple of years, I didn't, first couple of months even, I didn't really know how to go for a long time either. But I kind of just started learning as I went how to stay abroad longer and find different visas and things. And so, 3 months of travels kind of ended up turning into off and on 7+ years of being abroad. And I realized along the way that there were a lot of people that wanted to know more about how I was doing that. And so the business was an idea that I had towards the beginning of the pandemic is when it really kind of became an option because obviously there were no jobs in the travel industry.
Mhm.
So I decided to start my own business where I help other people find out how to achieve long-term travel goals abroad. And I kind of do that through, travel coaching essentially and helping people find international work opportunities and visas that are open to them. And it's been kind of a fun journey getting started with something in the travel industry at a time when no one was traveling. But the goal was just to be ready for when things would start returning and when people were looking to get out and be abroad long term again. So yeah, the business is all about helping people go abroad for extended periods of time. And yeah, it's been kind of an adventure starting that during COVID.
Yeah, that's so cool, and what a time to start that too.
Yeah.
What can you speak to any successes that you've had in coaching clients?
Well, it's kind of cool, actually. A few of them have kept me, they keep me in their loop once they get out there and start doing their thing. And I've had one client who's just come back from her first like big backpacking trip, and she was in Europe for a couple months and did the train pass and was traveling around. And I think she went to 17 countries
Wow.
in the span of a couple months. Yeah, and that was exciting for me because that was how my travels started as well. And it was fun to see, her take off on that adventure because she hadn't really done much international travel yet. And, there's a lot of fear that kind of comes up before you take a trip like that. And you're like, I don't know how this is
Mhm.
going to work. How am I going to accomplish this? And is this crazy? The people around me think this is crazy. So it was fun to see her not only like go out there and do it, but have an awesome time and come back and be like, wow, that was incredible. And I helped another kid find out about his options to teach English in Spain, and he's currently finishing up like a first year as a teacher in Spain, and has decided to sign a contract for a second year and go back out there and do it all over again. So it's really cool to see kind of how people evolve and how their travel stories evolve as they go. So yeah, I would say those are two of the more exciting ones because they're kind of happening in real time. But yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So where did your love of travel kind of stem from?
It's funny. My dad always traveled a lot for work. And I remember as a kid, he would go off on these trips for sometimes 2 weeks at a time. And he was always traveling for business. So he was very much going for meetings and things that were prearranged. And as a kid, I didn't really know. I just knew that he was going these places and coming back. And he would always bring like a little something back with him from these trips, a snack from this place or a little piece of art or something, just something random to share with my brothers and I always thought that was pretty fun. And I was interested in going abroad, but at one point when I think I was 13, we got the chance to go with him on a business trip to Switzerland. And
Oh
so that
wow.
was my first, it was like my first time outside the US really. Um, it was just such an eye-opening experience, and I remembered being like floored by the landscapes and the culture and the food and everything about it. And I mean, I was still a kid in many ways, but I remember thinking like, wow, if I can find a way to do this like on my own and in a number of places, that would be awesome. But I think I just didn't really know how to make it happen. And so it wasn't really until after college that I had been saving up some money, and I just decided to go out for a little bit and see what I could see with my budget. And it kind of, I think the real love for travel came about once I actually got out there and started going, and I realized, how much more there was to see and how much more I wanted to do. And it kind of, it's weird how it grows like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know about you, but I feel like the more I travel, the longer my list gets of things I want to
Yeah,
see. And
definitely. Exactly. What places
uh,
are on your list right now?
oh gosh, everywhere. I got a trip planned to Everest Base Camp coming up.
Awesome. That is very
Yeah,
cool.
that should be fun, and I'll try to work in some other travel, before and after that, because it's a long ways to get there.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but I would say, like other ones that are at the top of my list: Antarctica, Japan. Um, I don't know. I'd like to do more of Southeast Asia. It's been a
Yeah,
while since I've been there. More of Africa for sure.
very cool. Oh, Africa's exciting. I'm a big
I
fan
know.
of
I
it.
was looking at your pictures. You got a lot of pictures from Africa.
I do. That was a place where it was just easy to just like get totally sucked into photography. I mean, I'm an amateur, but it was really fun to take photos there. Actually, that was probably one of my more favorite trips as far as like the pictures that I got out of it. Um, yeah.
Where where all did you go in Africa?
So I am very fortunate. I have a really good friend who I met when I was working in Cambodia, and she's from Zimbabwe, and she kind of organized and planned the whole trip for us. So it was about a month-long trip where we went to South Africa, Namibia, Zambia, Zimbabwe, and a quick day trip into Botswana, where I learned a very silly lesson in preparing in advance for my visas at the border. But it was a great trip overall. But I ended up dishing out. Long story short, I ended up dishing out twice as much on visas when I went to Botswana for the day because I forgot to get a multi-entry visa for Zimbabwe. So we left for the day, and upon return, I had to buy a new visa to get back into Zimbabwe because I hadn't purchased a multiple entry, which I
Oh,
hadn't really thought about. Because in my mind, I was like, we're just going for the day. But yeah, it's funny how that stuff happens. And quick lesson learned there. But yeah,
dang.
we did 4 countries with that little day trip there. So it was amazing.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, Africa is just it's such a unique place, and I
Yeah.
feel like I always like talking with someone who's been there because it's so different from what people usually travel to see. Uh,
Yeah, yeah. And I forget too, it's funny, I just listed those places, but I've also been to Morocco, but that's another thing is you kind of forget that, Northern Africa and Southern Africa. I mean, well, for one, it's a huge continent. So,
yeah,
you know, and the difference sometimes when you approach it, like when I went to Morocco, I was coming from Europe. So I think in my mind, I wasn't even picturing that, I wasn't even picturing adding that to the list because when I went to
mhm,
Africa, I'd come more from the South. And so I almost was thinking like, oh, those are two different places, but of course they're all they're all in
yeah,
Africa. It was just from very different perspectives that I came into each of those travels.
yeah. Well, and yeah, and like you said, I mean, very very different places. Morocco is much different than
Yeah,
South Africa or Zimbabwe.
yeah, yeah.
Much
So,
different
so
history
much
and
to see.
culture.
Hmm.
Yeah. So yeah. So how many countries have you been to?
On on paper, I've been to 49 countries.
40.
I feel kind of cheeky about some of those because they haven't all been for extended periods of time, and some of them have been
Mhm.
short trips, 2 or 3 days maybe. But technically, yes, 49 countries, and I'm hoping to do my 50th in September. So
All right. What's going to be number 50?
I'm looking at Jordan. I'm hoping to go to Jordan
Okay.
in September, which I'm very excited about. I've been hoping to go for a couple of years, so looking forward to making that happen.
Nice. That's awesome. That's definitely one that's at the top of my list as well. my friends that I've traveled with FTLO, the last couple trips, we actually all booked Jordan for next year. So
Oh, cool.
yeah, we're looking
That'll be
forward to
super
that.
fun. Are you doing it like as part of a group tour, or are you kind of independently organizing it?
Yeah, we're doing it through FTLO
Oh,
again.
nice, nice.
Yeah,
That's so fun. Yeah,
it's
it's
sorry, go ahead.
oh, there, I was just thinking, there's some trips that are easier to kind of like book as part of a packaged, group experience. And for me as well, like Jordan is a place I've always wanted to go, but I think I've been a little, to be honest, I've been a little lazy to plan it myself. So I'll be going with a group tour as well, actually. And I think it'll be nice to have someone else take all the planning and coordination out of that for me.
Yeah, nice. That's the thing that I've kind of found recently. It's like, yeah, I know I could go do Jordan by myself and could go do
Yeah.
all these other places, but it's like I don't really want to necessarily. Um, it's more fun to have that group, and especially if you find it, a good group of people, uh,
Yeah.
it makes that trip so much better.
Yeah. And sometimes, I mean, I love traveling and I've done a lot of solo travel, but honestly, sometimes you're just tired of, I don't know, kind of doing the small talk over and over again with new
Yeah.
people in each location. And then, you know, sharing rooms if you're staying in hostels and things like that. Like sometimes you just want to take all the guesswork out and just have like a prepackaged group of people that you can kind of hang out with and get comfortable with over the course of a couple days. You don't have to spend the time, asking for recommendations for places and, everything's kind of ready to go and you can just show up and have a good time. And then there's a lot to be said for that.
hmm Definitely, definitely. So yeah, with your 49 countries, what would be maybe some of your favorites that you've been to?
Yeah. Oh gosh. That's like one of those common questions that I still feel like I don't have an answer for. And sometimes I change my answer
Yeah, it's
at
always
different times of the year. If somebody asks me, I'll be like, oh, this time it's this, and another time it's that.
Mhm.
But I think overall, New Zealand and Australia have a really special place in terms of my travel story. And so I'm a big fan of New Zealand in particular. I just love the landscape there and the people. And that's actually one of the few places I've been to multiple times. Like a lot of times I try not to go back somewhere that I've been before, visiting somewhere new. I'll try and go somewhere new before I go back to a place a second time. But New Zealand, somehow I've been there, I think, four times,
Wow.
three or four times. Yeah. And it was easier when I was living in Southeast Asia because I could just kind of fly down there and it wasn't as far as coming from the States, for example. But yeah, I mean, it's not an expensive place. I mean, it's not an inexpensive place to travel. So you do kind of have to prepare for it in advance, I feel like, and mentally prepare yourself
Mhm.
for the cost of that one. But it's such a beautiful location and I just love all the adventure and activity there is to do there. And it's just a place to kind of get totally lost in nature and just explore and cover a lot of ground in a small space. Like it's
Mhm.
pretty interesting for that. Have you been?
Oh yeah, that's when people ask me that same question, it is a very difficult question to answer, but usually my answer is New Zealand as well.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I,
What's
I
your
studied abroad in Sydney and then I went to New Zealand for almost 2 weeks and just
oh
absolutely fell in love. I mean, it's just so incredible. Like you said, the landscape is just out of this world. There's so much you can do there. You can find anything that you want to do. You can be
yeah.
people, you don't have to be around people. There's lots of places to go off on your own, but
Yeah,
it's an
definitely.
amazing place.
Yeah, this is just such a beautiful country. I don't know. I like some of the specific memories I have, like in my travels, when I think about all of it together. A lot of the memories that come to top of mind are specific hikes in New Zealand, or day trips I took, or just drives that I was on, and remember being totally like caught up in the scenery, and it holds so many like big important memories and location spots.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So I noticed that you always like to skydive or bungee jump. Did you get to do that in New Zealand?
I did my first bungee jump in New Zealand. Um, the Nevis bungee down outside of Queenstown, so on the South
Okay.
Island. And that one, I think it was like 146 meters, which I don't even remember what that is in feet, but
A long
um,
way.
yeah, it was a pretty long fall, but very, very scary, I'll admit. I had been skydiving already a few times at that point, and I was like, "This is my big push." I'm gonna go bungee jumping. And it's so funny because you picture if you picture yourself doing something like that, you imagine yourself doing this amazing Superman jump where you just like throw your arms out and you jump out into the,
Yeah.
like it's nothing. In your head, you're like, "I got this. I can do this." And oh my gosh, when you are standing there, you are like, "This is not what I pictured." This is
Mhm.
you're looking down and you're like, oh, geez, I don't know about this. And I think what I did was kind of just more like a walk off the plank kind of thing, just into the sky. But it was very cool to do that. And the funny thing was after that, I watched the video and I was like, man, that's not a very impressive jump, and it ended up forcing me to do it again. And when I was in Africa, I did it over the Victoria Falls, the
Oh, wow.
waterfall. And I was like, okay, this time I'm going to go for a big Superman jump. And it came out much better. So, but
That's
yeah,
cool. Yeah,
doing,
that's where I did bungee jumping the first time was I think it was Kawaru
yeah,
bungee.
the Colorado. Yeah, cool. That's a
Yeah,
beautiful
that's
place to do a bungee. Hey.
oh my gosh, yeah, it was fall down there when I was there, and so the leaves were all changing. It was perfect. But yeah,
Oh,
the video is not impressive at all.
it's funny how you envision yourself in these moments and then you see it in reality and you're like, well, that's not really what happened, but okay.
Yeah, it's it's a fun one to laugh at, but you know what? I did it. Uh, it's cool to say that you did that sort of thing.
Yeah. Those
So
those go
where
down in
else?
the books for sure.
Yeah, where else have you skydived or bungee jumped?
So my first ever skydive was in actually, and you know what? I think that it's funny that the skydiving that I did the very first time was actually in Pennsylvania. I was 18, and I think that actually was a huge catalyst to my travels in a weird way. I mean, I was just in the States and it was for a friend's birthday. But it was like one of the first times I think I ever really pushed my own boundaries. And I think that that was an experience that made me feel confident and feel like, one day I can go out and I can go travel and I can go, if I can skydive, I can do anything. It was the first like confidence boosting moment in my life that I really remember, and that made me feel like I could tackle things that were scary and different.
Mhm.
And Yeah, so the first one was in Pennsylvania. And then the second one was in Switzerland for my 21st birthday. I did a helicopter skydive in the Swiss Alps, which was
Oh
very
wow.
cool. That was really neat to be in like a glass top helicopter and see the mountains there. And then the third one was New Zealand in Taupo at Lake Taupo, which is one of my favorite
Mhm.
places in New Zealand. And my fourth one was in Vanuatu, or no, not
Okay.
Vanuatu. Sorry, New Caledonia, which is a small like French Polynesian island.
Mhm.
Um, and that was pretty special as well. Just all different landscapes for all four of those, which was kind of neat. Even though that period of time that you're actually falling in the sky and then you get to be in the parachute, you're looking around. It's probably no more than a couple minutes, but every single one of those skydives had a completely different set of scenery. So it was kind of interesting to have all that variety for that kind of event.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure that changes your perspective on life. Like you said, it was a big confidence boost for you.
Yeah, yeah. And
Uh,
it kind of became part of the fun mission as well to like go in different places, because I
yeah,
part of it was like, well, I can go skydiving here, I can go skydiving here, and so it was like, okay, well now I've been skydiving 4 times in 4 different countries, and so that's become like another little milestone. I've started just like, oh, let me try and see how many places I can do this in.
yeah, yeah. I wonder how many people have, skydived in multiple different places. I would guess there's not that many.
There's probably not a ton, but for the people that are really into it, so the cool thing is, and actually one of my big goals in life actually is to get my skydiving license, which there's different levels of the license, but the A license is one of the, like first level of international licenses in skydiving. And it means that you're certified to dive in different locations around the world. So
Hmm.
once someone works towards getting that license, then they have access to it all over the world. And I think there's there's got to be a handful of people out there that have that license and that use it. And I've never met any myself, but I like to think that they're out there somewhere. I like to
Yeah,
hope that someday I can meet some others and be one of them. But for now, I gotta pick a location to do the course in. So
yeah.
first thing first.
What do you have to do to get a license?
So you usually have to do at least there's different courses depending on where you're doing it, but ultimately there's a number of jump hours that you have to accomplish, and a number of courses that you have to complete in order to prove that you have, the ground knowledge, the air handling knowledge, like there's a course in packing your parachute, in the first few jumps involve kind of being assisted by other skydivers that are guiding you through like a radio. So you actually will have like a special set of headset in, and you'll be listening to their kind of guidance along how to do certain things after you've taken a ground course. And so, yeah, basically it's a series of jumps that kind of get significantly more difficult with each one, and it's all testing your knowledge and experience in the air, and then eventually you take a test and you pass the first round, go into the second round. So it can be kind of lengthy and kind of expensive, which is why I haven't done it yet. But I know that technically, a lot of times you can do your first solo jump within, I think, 3 jumps is when you can do it
Oh,
completely
really?
independent. Yeah.
Wow.
If you're signed up and doing, like working the course, because they won't just let anybody just,
Yeah.
do a solo jump on their first go. I think it's funny when people are like, "Oh, did you do it tandem?" I'm like, "Well, do you know anyone that hasn't done it tandem? Like, you kind of
Yeah.
have to do it tandem the first few times. They're not just going to let you jump out of a plane." Um, but yeah, it is something that you can do actually at a bunch of jump centers all around the U.S. So I'm hoping now that I'm back to find a jump center and sign up for the course. So
Yeah, that kudos to you for doing that. That sounds awful to me.
have you ever
I
wanted to do a skydive, or have you done a skydive?
I was actually, that's the reason I bungee jumped, is I was supposed to
Uh,
skydive in New Zealand and in Queenstown, and like at the very last minute we were out there like ready to get suited up and everything, and they canceled it because of the weather. I
oh,
was
oh,
like,
bummer.
I got one day left. I don't have time to do this again, so I went bungee jumping instead.
There you go. Well, that works. That's a nice close swap out.
Yeah, but I was like, I just want to do this one time, never do it again. I
Oh,
have no
geez.
desire to jump out of a plane.
It's funny though. Bungee jumping I find is much harder than skydiving. Um,
Everyone says that. I
yeah.
don't know. Bungee jumping seems a lot easier to me.
Here's the thing though. Well, that's good. I mean, if you've done bungee jumping and if you find it easier, then I imagine if you were to go skydiving, you'd find that it's like a piece of cake in comparison. The big difference is with bungee jumping, like you are solo in that moment. Like it is up to you to
Mhm.
push yourself off the ledge, and that takes so much guts. And people don't realize sometimes how hard it is to like pull that courage up from inside you and be like, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna jump off this
Yeah.
platform. Whereas with the skydiving, like you have a person, like a large human attached to your back, right? And they know what they're doing, and they're controlling pretty much everything in that first dive. So like you're just along for the ride, and they're
Mhm.
basically going to be the one to push you both out of the plane. And you don't have to do any work on the way down. You just have to enjoy the scenery. So in many ways it takes all the hard work out of it for you, and it just packages it up, and like you're just coming along for this amusement park ride, okay?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It was actually funny when I after I bungee jumped, I was walking up the hill, and this lady just would not go off. She
Oh
would not
gosh.
jump off the platform and was freaking out, screaming, would not do it. I kept counting down, and finally he was like, "You got to go." And he was like, "I'll give you one more chance." He was like, "Three, two, one." She didn't jump, and so he just straight pushed her off.
Oh gosh. Oh gosh. I hear of these things happening. I'm like, are these guys, do they ever get in trouble for that? Or is that what they're
Oh
supposed to
no.
do? That's crazy. But I
Uh,
bet she came back and was like, that was awesome.
yeah, yeah. Oh man,
I
funny.
have been known to convince a fair few people to do bungee jumps and skydives. People that are on the fence, I've been pretty good at persuading them to just go for it.
Okay, well, when you get your license, I'll go with you. I'll
Yeah,
go.
there we go. There we go. That's a plan.
Um, awesome. Well, yeah. So you've been traveling for 6, 7 years, pretty much full time. Is that right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, 7 years full time, and then there was another few years in the middle that I was kind of like in between locations in the U.S. So I realized recently, actually, I was like, well, technically, I've been on and off traveling for 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
So yeah, I know you mentioned on your website that you're a master packer and have lived out of a backpack for a very long time. So tell me a little bit about that.
Wow, yeah, longer than I want to admit, but it's kind of funny too because my bachelor's degree, my undergrad was in fashion merchandising. So to think, sometimes I think it's
Okay.
funny that I went from studying fashion and retailing to living out of like a backpack with very few options for clothes, shoes,
Yeah.
everything else. But I do like to think of myself as a master packer, and I find it easier to pack for longer periods of time than shorter periods of time. It's funny, if anyone sees me trying to get ready for like a weekend away, I feel like it's harder for me to pack for that than it is, to go for a year somewhere. Um, but I started out with a 55-liter backpack, and now I use a 45-liter backpack. Gregory is my favorite brand for backpacks. And they sell them at REI, and I actually have just like totally loved their products over the years. But anyway, they make some backpacks that I really like because they have these amazing front loading pockets that are easy to zip open. So I think the main thing that I always tell people when they're like looking to choose a backpack and, become an organized backpacker, if you're doing like a multi-city thing instead of or a multi-location thing instead of a hiking or backcountry backpacking trip, it's really important to get one of those front loading packs because then you can kind of set it down on the ground like almost like a suitcase and then zip open the top and open it up like it's a duffel bag or something. So
Mm.
having that front loading pack, but then also being able to access your bag from the top is like super helpful. And just using a front loading pack, I think is what has helped me become really organized and like a really good packer is just being able to have compartments kind of that I use specifically for different things. And I use a lot of packing cubes as well. So
Okay.
yeah, I tend to keep things pretty organized within my pack. And I know like everything has a place that it lives.
Mhm.
And I try and always put everything back in its exact place so that I never lose anything. Um, and yeah, those are the simple basics to it. But
Yeah, what was that like? So you're traveling for, for a very long time. You're going through, you only have so many clothes that you can work with. Do you bring like laundry detergent and stuff with you, or do you find places where you can do that, or just not
yeah,
wash the clothes at all?
yeah, I tend to find places where I can do that. I do end up doing a lot of sink washing too sometimes, like depending on, if I'm not doing any like super rigorous traveling, I'll just wash things in the sink sometimes, like one at a time as they get dirty, because then you keep up with it pretty easily. And you can buy these little solutions of like highly concentrated laundry detergent essentially and just put like a few drops in a sink and then just hand wash a few things and then hang them to dry, and they can usually dry pretty quickly if you're moving on in a fast period of time and don't have a lot of time for like a full wash and a full dry.
Mhm.
But in general, I tend to pack with I do a capsule wardrobe kind of thing where I basically have a few set colors that I tend to pack, and they're all colors that work well together. And I don't pack too many patterns. I pack things like bandanas and scarves to kind of like bring in some patterns, but for the most
Mhm.
part, all the things that I pack are things that can be interchangeable and used together. So like all of my tops work well with all of my bottoms, and everything can be switched around. And I know that sounds kind of silly, but people don't think about it. And if they pack sometimes things that don't work well together, you end up feeling like nothing in your pack is easy to use when things start getting dirty. But if everything kind of works well together, it makes it a little easier. And I do a lot of layering and a lot of like I'll have a puffer vest, but also like a lightweight jacket that'll fit over all of that, and then a raincoat that will fit on top of everything. And so if I'm in colder places, you might find me wearing all three of those things. But if I'm in somewhere
Mhm.
cooler, you might find me wearing just like one of the layers. So a lot of layering, capsule wardrobe, and washing things as I go. Those are always things that have been pretty helpful in terms of like keeping things organized, but also packing light. I think the shoes are always the harder one. It's like trying to decide on what shoes are best to bring, but that always depends on what kind of adventures you're getting up to. Like if you're doing some serious hiking or if you're just going to be doing light
Mhm.
hikes. I tend to bring a lot of trail runners because I think they're good for, they work as an all around like walking around in the day shoe, but also can handle light hikes and things.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
yeah, I would say
Yeah.
that's the gist of
Was
it.
it hard or difficult to to get used to living out of a backpack?
Um, I don't think it was. It definitely is like a little transition period. You're trying to find your swing of things and like especially, when you're living in hostels, which I was so much at the beginning. I was in and out of hostels constantly. So you're sharing other spaces with other people. And so trying to find a place to kind of like get used to where you keep everything in your bag, and keeping it tidy enough that you don't start losing track of things when you're in a room with multiple people. I think that was like the weirdest transition part of it, was that first couple weeks where I was like, okay, where does this live in my bag, and where can I keep my bag when I'm out for the day? And I want to make sure that things are organized and tidy so that when I come back, I don't have to do a big massive repack. And what I found was that after the first couple weeks, when it is a little bit weird and you are figuring out where everything belongs, after that first couple weeks, eventually you work your own system and you figure out where exactly everything's going to be and how you want to keep your bag when you're out for the day exploring and then coming back and then needing to hop on a train really quickly. And once you get in a rhythm, then it becomes so easy actually to live out of a backpack, because you're like, you do know where everything is, and you do know, how you keep things and what you need frequently and what you don't. And um, it does become kind of a bit of a system to just do the same thing in and out of every location wherever you are, develop patterns for how you find things and keep things clean and tidy. Um, so after a while, it really wasn't too bad, and then it just became the norm. And there's something very simple about it, and it's nice, I think, to just feel like you're living in this simple existence where you don't have too many options. You don't, everything's narrowed down for you every single day, and you know exactly what you have. And there's no thinking about what you're going to wear, or you don't find yourself tempted to buy things as frequently because you have nowhere to put them.
Yeah.
So yeah, you don't end up buying souvenirs, you don't end up buying new clothes, you don't need any of that. You realize you're just living with what you have, and that's all you have space for. So you learn to get by with it, and there's something very nice and simple about that, I would say.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like that takes some like energy, or gives you some extra energy because you're not
Yeah.
thinking or worrying about, oh, what am I going to wear today? You only
Yeah.
got one option.
Yeah. And it's funny because I remember seeing some people that would come with these huge backpacks. I'm talking like 85-liter backpacks, or like huge suitcases. And that was always interesting to me because, you start out thinking you need so many things, but by the end of their trips, they were like, I'm not even using any of this.
Yeah.
And I'm just carrying it around every day. And, you start to learn what you really need and what you really don't. And it was funny because then I'd see some of those people again later down the line in different travels, and they might be like, oh, now I just travel with a 60-liter or a 50-liter, and they ditched the high heels or the hair dryers or whatever else they were bringing, and
Yeah.
it's always interesting to see how people realize what they do and don't need once they're actually on the road.
Definitely. Yeah. You learn that we don't need a lot of things that we're used to in our normal lives.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Um, Sorry, go ahead.
no, it just makes for living a simpler life when you come home too. I think when especially if you're going for a long time and you come back, you start to look at your own belongings differently and the things you have and use daily, and you're like, well, what of this do I actually need anymore? And it's funny when people start to shift it and prioritize travel in the back of their minds as like, well, if I'm going to be taking a trip at some point, like I probably won't need this anymore, and
Mhm.
yeah, start to live with less almost.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I know. I think too, traveling to, I know you talked about being in Cambodia, and like I went
Hmm.
to Guatemala, and just seeing how, how little they live on and how happy they are.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, wow, like I don't need all these fancy new things and clothes and, the newest gadget and things like that. Like
Yeah.
there's another way to do this.
Absolutely, absolutely. And especially in those travel experiences that really teach you so much more about the world beyond yourself. I think those are some of the most important ones to have takeaways from, because you get used to living, especially if you're living in the States, for example. You have access to so much, and there's so much around you all the time. And, you think you need these things because you're used to living with them. But until you're put in a different environment and realize how different life can be without all those same things, I think that's when, your perspectives can start to shift in terms of your own life and your own values and the things that you think are important. And I think that those kind of trips can do a lot for long-term growth and long-term perspective. And
Mhm.
yeah, living simply, there's a lot to be said for it. And I think my time in Cambodia, as it sounds like your time in Guatemala, was one of those experiences where you realize, it, you really don't need that much to get by and to be happy in life. And a lot of times what's most important is the people around you, and the environment that you're in here and now, and whatever you need to get by and exist in that doesn't always have to involve the technology and the social media and all the things that we fill our lives with day to day,
Hmm.
when we're not exposed to those environments. And I think it's really interesting to see and learn what we can live and live without.
Yeah, definitely. And I think too, I mean, not to go down this rabbit hole too much, but I think some of the happiest countries on earth are the ones that, are some of the poorest and things
Absolutely.
like that. I know here in the US, we're getting more and more depressed and anxiety all the time, but we have more and more things all the time too.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
so.
I could, believe me, I could go down that rabbit hole for days. I think, I think that's something that you really notice when you take some time away and separate yourself from it. And it's no, in my eyes, it's no coincidence that, that is the way things are here. And, with people becoming more depressed and more anxious, you can't, it's hard to ignore those parallels. Um,
Mm.
and yeah, I think it's interesting. I remember when I was in Cambodia, one of the memories I have from when I first moved there, seeing a couple kids running around in the village, and they had these empty water bottles that they'd cut in half and they'd turned into like little cars. They had sliced the water bottles lengthwise and taken the bottle caps from the water bottles and made wheels
Oh,
with the
nice.
bottle caps. And they had, just popped a little stick through there and put the bottle caps on either end and created these little cars. And then they attached a string to them and tied them to the backs of their bicycles. And they were riding around the village with their bikes, dragging their, little homemade water bottle cars behind them. And they were having the best time. I mean, the best time I've ever seen little kids have in that kind of, that setting was just, in so many ways, it was so foreign to me, because you see kids in the States sometimes with, all these toys and all these fun things, but sometimes it's the simple things that can be really bring the best joy, like a cardboard box or something. You get it,
Yeah.
how often can you think of times where kids got gifts for Christmas or birthdays or whatever, and all they wanted to play with was the cardboard box, So it's just bringing it back to the basics. And I remember seeing that and just being so happy that these kids were so happy with so little, and knowing that sometimes less really is more.
Hmm.
So,
Definitely. Like,
yeah.
yeah, it's so fun to see. I think that's part of why I think everyone should travel is
Yeah,
you get to see a different perspective of life and a different way of doing things. And it
definitely.
might, even if you don't change your lifestyle or something, I think it just helps you shift your perspective a little bit.
Agreed. Agreed. I think everyone should travel if they can find the time. And I think one of my favorite, like fun facts about travel sometimes is actually that it doesn't, people think it's expensive. They think you need a lot of money to travel. And I think that that couldn't be farther from the truth sometimes. You really, when I'm traveling full time, I spend less money than I do if I were living full time in the US.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that like blows people's minds sometimes. But I'm like, well, really, when you're moving around constantly, like think about all the money that you put towards your car, your apartment, your,
Hmm.
health insurance, your all the things that we spend, your phone bill, your internet, all those things, streaming services. If you took all of that money and put it towards travel instead, like you find you don't need streaming services because you're busy seeing things all the time. You don't need internet full time because you have it wherever you're staying probably. And, so much of that money could be filtered to some other, some other endeavor. And I think it's fascinating to think that travel doesn't have to be really expensive. If you like to travel a certain way, of course it can be, but you can travel affordably and still experience the world and learn new things and see so much on so much less than you would maybe live on in the States.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, there's so many places that are far cheaper in
Yeah,
terms of the living. So your money's going to go a lot further in those places.
definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a question I get all the time is how are you able to do all of this? Being a 20 something, they're like, how have you traveled so much on all of this?
What
And
do you tell people?
I mean, essentially what you just said is, I mean, it depends on how you want to travel. I've done a lot of the hostel life. I've traveled in very, very cheap ways, not spending a lot of money on different things, and just going out and seeing the world.
Yeah.
You're able to find those opportunities where, maybe you're looking at flights and one day it drops $200 or there's some sort of discount or whatever, and you
Hmm.
jump on the kind of thing. I think it takes a little bit of planning and research maybe, but you totally can live on very, very little every day and travel the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
What
I
would
think
be sorry, go ahead.
no, it's funny. I tell people sometimes when I was living in Cambodia, my phone service was $5 a month, and it was the best phone service I've ever had. And my apartment was, $250 a month, and it was one of my favorite apartments ever. And it's, when I tell people that sometimes they're like, "Wow, really?" And I'm like, "Yeah, life." I mean, granted, that's a very affordable. That's one specific destination that is particularly affordable, but in general, it gave me access to so many other places close by. I could easily get to Vietnam by a bus, or Thailand by a quick bus, or fly up to Laos or Malaysia. There were so many places you could access from there. And so being based, and sometimes long-term travel, I think is really interesting too. It's like a cheaper way to travel is by traveling slower, as opposed to
Mhm.
like cramming everything into a week or 2 weeks. If you take a month, sometimes you can spend even less and see a little more. And so that's
Yeah,
always an interesting twist to the way people tend to view travel.
yeah. I know. Like if you're traveling, if you're flying to Europe for a week and then flying back, that's going to be expensive.
Right.
But if you're flying to Europe and then you take the train for 2 months, uh,
Hmm.
that's a lot cheaper, kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it's just kind of thinking through it. I think and finding those opportunities. And obviously, Europe's going to be more expensive than some other parts of the world too. So finding those
Yeah.
cheap nations helps as well.
Definitely.
Um, so then, yeah, you worked abroad as well. Tell me a little bit about working visas and that sort of thing.
Yeah, so the working visas were ones that I didn't even know existed until I got into traveling and started meeting other people who told me about them, which is ultimately why I ended up starting my business, was because I wanted to help other people find out about the visas that I'd learned about along the way. But the two best ones that I think are that are totally underrated still are the Australia and New Zealand working holiday visas,
Mm,
which are for anyone who's got a bachelor's degree. I think in some cases they have extended it recently to an associate's as well. Previously, you needed a 4-year degree in order to be eligible. But I think now they've actually changed it a little bit because, quite honestly, after the pandemic, they just, they didn't, for 2 years, they had no international work coming in. And those
mhm.
visa opportunities are actually ones that help fuel their economies quite a bit as well. So they've changed up some of the rules recently and changed the age restrictions and things like that, which is great. But the working holiday visas are pretty unique because you can go for a year to New Zealand, but now Australia lets you extend up to, I think, 3 years maximum.
Oh wow.
And you can do any kind of work, which is awesome. You don't have to have a job before you go. You don't have to be committed to working in any particular industry. You don't have to work in the industry for which you had a degree. Like, you can do any kind of work. And the funny thing is, you get over there, and most people are not even trying to take on serious jobs. They're just trying to have an experience.
Yeah.
So a lot of people are, working hospitality or retail or in tourism. So they're doing fun jobs. They're doing jobs that allow them to like have some flexibility with their schedule and get out a bit more, and you can also take on jobs in offices or in more serious positions. But for the most part, a lot of people treat it like an experience in international living. It's a chance to be abroad and experience a new place and meet new people. And the type of jobs you can get are often with other travelers, and so you're exposing yourself to people from around the world. So I really love those working holiday visas, and I think they're such a golden opportunity. And I did one in New Zealand and one in Australia, and it's just an amazing experience. And then my in Cambodia, it was a work visa that I was on, and I got that through the company that I was working for. And that was a job that I just found through a friend that I met while I was on a working holiday visa in Australia. So the connections that you start to make once you're on the road, they kind of open new doors for you. And the work visa, I wouldn't say that's always something that's going to be easy for people to get, but the working holiday visas, if you meet the criteria for Australia and New Zealand working holiday visas, you're almost guaranteed to get the visa. And I mean, those are just phenomenal opportunities to get out and see amazing pieces of the world and get to earn a local wage, which makes it easier to get by, because like I said, it can be expensive to travel in Australia and New Zealand, but if you're working in those countries and earning those wages, then it's actually a lot easier and a lot more reasonable to kind of get around and see things. So
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
yeah.
With those visas, are you allowed to leave the country?
You are, yes. They're considered multiple entry visas. So a lot of people actually do. They come, sometimes they'll only do the visa for a couple months, sometimes they'll do it for the full year. But during that time, you're always allowed to leave and come back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a
Um,
good base for exploring like Southeast Asia and stuff like that.
yeah, yeah, definitely. And just for the listeners, what would be the difference between a work visa and a working holiday visa?
So it's just the working holiday visa is something that that the New Zealand and Australian governments offer to different countries. And so it's just the name for the visa. So the
Okay.
biggest thing about visas is like knowing the type of visa that you need. And a working holiday visa is open pretty much to anyone that meets the criteria, and the criteria is pretty broad. Like I said, having a degree, being able to prove that you're in good health, and prove that you have a certain amount of money in your bank account to support yourself. And they, again, allow you to do any kind of work, whereas work visas, almost every country offers work visas, but the conditions under which you need to get one, you typically already have to have a job lined up. You can't get a work visa usually if you don't have a job. Um, so in many of those cases, you have to kind of apply for a job first. They have to offer you one, and the company has to be willing to help sponsor you to get a work visa,
Mhm.
which is usually a little bit trickier of a process, because unless your job is actually needed, then for the most part, there's a lot of countries that aren't really interested in sponsoring people to come and work because they have local workers that can do the job. So in a lot of cases, unless you have like a highly specific skill set or something that they actually need in the country, then it can be tougher to get a a work visa in particular. But it just depends. Every country does it differently. But the working holiday visa is a unique opportunity that's catered just to a certain market. So it's an audience of people between the ages of approximately 18 and 35, I would say. So it's a youth visa that it's made to kind of encourage youth to come live and work, whereas a work visa could be all ages. That's just something
Mhm.
that you have to have the specifics to kind of meet the requirements and apply for.
Yeah,
But the working holiday visa is kind of like a very open-ended visa that's just targeting a specific age group.
yeah. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Is there any places that you're looking at to have a work visa in the future?
You know what? It's weird to say this, but I'm actually pretty much done with my travel, with my like big long-term travels now, my big long-term
Okay.
moves. I have reached a point where I'm ready to like set down roots somewhere, because as much as I love living out of a backpack, it's been a little over 7 years. So I think I'm ready to find a home and make it a home. And I'll still, of course, do a lot of traveling, but yeah, I'm ready to have a place that I can kind of unpack my bags and feel like I'm setting up roots for myself somewhere. So I think I'm done with my big international moves. It's funny, I was actually offered a job in France 3 weeks
Oh,
ago,
wow.
and it was so weird to be like, I'm going to turn this down because I actually am ready to be home.
Hmm.
So no more big moves for me. And I've aged out of all the visas that I know about, that I was eligible for. So all the I did my 2 working holiday visas, and then the other working holiday visas that I learned about. Um, I'm too old to do them now, so they're out of the out of the question for me. But yeah, I decided it's time to be home.
Oh, well, very cool. Do you feel like because you've done all of that travel that you feel like I don't
Satisfied.
know, yeah, satisfied and like
Yeah.
okay, that I've moved on to a different stage in life, and I
Yeah, yeah. And yes, I do think I feel satisfied now. I mean, it's so weird because when I was going, I was like, I'll never get tired of this. And I won't. I'll never get tired of that kind of moving around, but I did reach a point at some point, I wasn't sure, to be honest. I wasn't sure if it was going to come or not, that I'd ever find a point where I was ready to kind of stop. And yeah, I mean, I reached a point recently where I was like, this has been an incredible adventure, and I'm like very proud of myself for having accomplished it, because it was something I always wanted to do and I just never knew how, and I just I did just figure it out, and I'm very proud of myself for going out there and doing it, and learning as I went. But yeah, I mean, eventually I reached a point where I was like, I think I'm tired, and I think I want a community in one place. And a way to do that was to take a break from at least living abroad and constantly moving. I mean, I'm still, like I said, I'm still going to travel a ton. But now it's going to be with a home base, hopefully. Whereas before I didn't actually have a home base. I was just constantly, like when my visa was over, I would go to a new place because I didn't have anywhere else to be.
Yeah.
Whereas now I'm like, okay, I want a place of my own to be a home base, and then I'll travel from there.
Hmm.
So that's my goal right now. But in many ways, like, you're never fully satisfied once you've got the travel bug in you, let's be
Yeah.
honest. But I'm satisfied enough to call it quits with the constant moving and be done with the visa to visa thing. I'm ready to like build a community in a new place and set down some roots and just, yeah, do shorter backpacking trips from here on out, like a couple months at a time and come back.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah.
Um, well, Geneva, any other travel or working travel tips or stories that you want to share?
Honestly, just in the tips department, I really just like, I can't encourage people enough to get out there and travel, and specifically taking advantage of visas. Like if you still have the opportunity, if you're still within the age limit to do a working holiday visa, for example, and you meet the criteria, and if it's something you want to do, don't pass up that opportunity because it'll be gone before you know it. And so many people would say, "Oh, I'll do it later. I'll do it later." There's this good thing going on in my life right now, and I just want to ride this out. And I get that, but like these visas, I've seen so many people miss out on them because next thing you know, one good thing leads to another, and then you're kind of like, "Well, I'm comfortable here. I'm comfortable." And then, once those opportunities are gone, they are not easy to come by again. And
Yeah.
I've learned that myself. And there were three other working holiday visas that I didn't learn about until I was too old to apply for any of them. And I'm only like early-ish 30s. But I've already aged out of all of the opportunities, and I only got to do two of like six. So
Mhm.
it's the kind of thing where if you keep waiting, eventually that they won't be options anymore. And so I can't encourage people enough to like just go out there and do it. And if you don't know how, find somebody who can help you. That's why I started my business, was to help people learn what their options are and feel comfortable actually going out there and doing it, because it can be scary. It can be scary to move to a new place and, get set up with a bank account and a tax number and a new phone number and a new address. But it's once you're doing it, it's not that bad. And my goal is to help, make that process easier for people, help them know where they can go and how to go about doing it, one step at a time, because otherwise it can be really overwhelming. But it doesn't have to be, and it can be such an adventure on the other side. So really, I just want to encourage more people to take advantage of these things they want to do, and not just wait until the perfect chance, because the perfect chance never really comes if you just like make
Yeah.
it.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah.
So
You're never going to have a perfect time. There's always going to be some reason to not do it.
yeah, yeah. You gotta
Yeah.
pick and choose your battles and go for these adventures when you can.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. So why should people, go to your website? Why should they talk with you about working abroad or long-term travel, and what kind of services do you provide to people?
Yeah, so I mean, I would hope that people find me if they're interested in, working abroad and finding out about their visa options. I do focus mostly on travel and work abroad coaching. So, I sometimes it's just one session so that I can give you the inspiration and the tools you need to go off and tackle things on your own. But if you're looking for more guidance, like I do have 3 and 4 session, 3 and 5 session packages where I work with people like more long term to develop an actual plan and feel a little bit more confident going out there and moving to a new place. But my main goal is to help like get people abroad for these visas and help them understand what their options are. And so, if you're whether you're just looking for inspiration, I've got these free calls that I offer people just to kind of like talk through the options. Or if you're looking to take action, then yeah, 3, 5 sessions, whatever we need to make sure that you're like plane ticket in hand and en route and ready to go live a year or more somewhere. But yeah, just, reach out if you're just like not even sure, if you just want to know like what is there that's out there, what can I do? I'm pretty good at just hashing out options with people. So my website is hopefully a good way to get some inspiration, and there's a few blog posts on there. I haven't touched the blog in a little while, but I'm hoping to get back on that shortly. And start putting some more kind of inspiring posts up there about different types of things you can do abroad, and how to travel affordably, and how to pack light. So definitely keep an eye on the website for that. And yeah, I mean, just all the different ways I can help people kind of go fun places and do fun stuff.
Yeah, awesome. And what is your website?
So it's unwrapyourmap.com, and I'm also on social media at unwrapyourmap. And yeah, I'm happy to connect with people however they want to find me, but Instagram is probably one of the easiest ways. And then I also have a contact me thing through my website, and you can also sign up through calls directly through unwrapyourmap.com as well. And those are your best bets to track me down and start learning about travel opportunities.
Yeah, yeah. I would recommend to all the listeners, if nothing else, at least go check out the Instagram and website because you got amazing pictures on there, very
Thanks.
well laid out and everything. It's awesome. I've enjoyed looking through it the last couple of days.
Thanks. It was fun to make it, so I'm glad you enjoy it.
Well, Geneva, thank you so much. I really appreciate the time and sharing your experiences and knowledge. I really enjoy the conversation, and I think you've really inspired me to look more into, some of those extended travel opportunities as well.
Yeah, well, good. I hope so. And yeah, I hope other people find it helpful as well. Thanks, Kyle. This has been fun.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I hope you have a great rest of the day, and look forward to seeing you somewhere around the world soon.
Sounds great. Sounds like a plan.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Yep, I'll talk to you later.
Okay. Bye.
Bye. Hey everybody, Kyle here. If you enjoyed today's show and want more, you can always check out every episode on Spotify, Anchor, YouTube, and now Amazon Music as well. Just search for Our Travel Experiences on any of those platforms and it will pop up. You can also find everything all in one place on my website, ourtravelexp.com. And if you want to see my travel pictures as well as travel pictures from guests on the show, you can check them out on Instagram. The page is called Our Travel Experiences Podcast. And if you want to share your own pictures on the Instagram page or be a guest on the podcast, you can message me via that Instagram page or email me at ourtravelexperiences@outlook.com. I would love to see your pictures and hear about your travel experiences, so please send them my way. And if that isn't enough for you, make sure to check out my weekly YouTube show, From Around the World Fridays. Every Friday, I'm taking 5 to 10 minutes to answer questions from listeners, share some souvenirs that I bought over the years, share my postcards over the years that I've accumulated, or share videos and pictures from one particular city or country that I visited, and so much more. So check it out, guys. You won't be disappointed. And make sure you go subscribe to that as well. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you somewhere around the world soon.